We've been through a lot here, Dan, with the Game of Thrones.
Yes.
So you deserve some scotch.
Good focus.
You do deserve some scotch for that.
Why not? It's good stuff. Yes, we are here for the final episode of A Song of Dan and Josh for 2019.
Yep.
It kind of just worked out this way naturally, by the way, that the final episode happened to fall on the end of the book we read.
No. We planned it this way. We absolutely
planned it this way. Ignore what I said. That guy's drunk. Listen to him. Over the past, a little over a year, you and I read the entirety of A Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin, chapter by chapter, sometimes two, sometimes one. Discussing it, I'd read the books before, you'd never read the books. And I thought we'd just take today, before we dive into A Clash of Kings next year, to just look back really quickly and just kind of give an appraisal. So my first question for you is, so you saw the show before you read this thing.
Yes.
Did anything surprise you about it? Was there anything different that you weren't expecting? Or did it go pretty much how you thought it would go?
It went pretty much the way that I thought it was going to go. I kept after reminding myself that the ages of the characters were different in the show and the book, which kind of changes some of the perspectives a little bit. Because they're basically adults on the show. And we're dealing with children in the books, especially in the Robb chapters, or the Catelyn chapters, when Robb is being described as doing these things, leading the army, strategizing.
Yeah, he's like 14
he's
or
a
like
kid.
13.
He should be learning algebra, but he's here and he's learning to command an army. And just kind of the the obvious. I knew this coming into the book because you've seen those slideshows all over the place that are like, this is what the Game of Thrones characters were supposed to look like, but obviously it's on TV, so they're not going to ugly up a bunch of pretty people. But Tyrion looking different and more, impish and ugly than he is on the show, and those kinds of things. Those weren't necessarily big takeaways. Mostly everything went according to script and plan.
Yeah,
but
it really did. There aren't a lot of plot changes. And I'm guessing that as someone who's watched the show first, you probably pictured the actors in those roles anyway.
Absolutely.
Like, it doesn't matter if no 13-year-old looks like Kit Harington. Like, you're still going to see Kit Harington when you read this, yes?
Yes. I absolutely. And Daenerys, and even, Khal Drogo, or Drogo, all of these characters.
I will say, I think the casting is one of the best parts of the show. That even though they didn't go for literalism, they still captured the spirit of the characters very, very nicely.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about the style? Anything... A Game of Thrones is a little weird because it is by far the most faithful to the books, right?
Yeah.
The first season of Game of Thrones.
There were still some things that George R. R. Martin had in there, just his descriptions. There were some very visceral moments.
We always came back to the bit where Jon's fighting the White, and the White shoves his hand down his mouth.
Yep, it's terrifying to read that. And then the chapter ends on that. There's no real conclusion. It's just Jon's fighting this White, and it shoves its hand down his throat. Okay, next chapter. It's what? It's very jarring, but it works.
It totally works.
Yeah.
And in some ways, there are some things that TV obviously does better than books, and vice versa. Maybe there's just not really a way to make you understand in screen form how violative or disgusting something like that could be.
Yeah.
Because I can't really think of a moment on the show that made me go ugh, in that sort of way.
The eating the horse heart, both in the book and on the show, is very
gross.
Gross.
Oh, God, the description.
Yeah.
So, I don't know about you, but when I reread this stuff, obviously, Ned is the backbone of the book, right?
Yes.
He has, I think I wrote him down, he has 15 chapters. That's by far the most of any character here.
Yeah.
My favorite, I think, when I read these was kind of Daenerys' story, just because it was totally isolated. It didn't, a lot of the other ones were kind of dependent on each other, but I loved how Daenerys was sort of just its own separate novel in a novel, in a way the others weren't. And I loved just the way Martin wrote some of her, especially the later chapters, where she was kind of going through these hallucinogenic states, after she had her baby, but before she killed Drogo. I loved that chapter. I loved the vividness and the imagination of some of the descriptions. I remember you really liking the Catelyn chapter.
The fever dream.
Yeah.
With Bran, yeah. I
was kind of surprised by that you kept bringing that one up.
It was that was the first kind of, because everything up until that point had kind of gone the way you'd expect a fantasy novel to go. It's very cut and dry. It's to the point. There's some fantastical things, and there's the world building that we have. That was the first chapter to me that kind of stood out, and I was like, this is a little bit different. It's the episode, the Fly episode of Breaking Bad, where it just kind of stops the story
Bottle
cold.
Episode, baby.
bottle up. It stops the story cold, and all they're doing is they're trying to kill a fly. That was the Fever Dream chapter to me, because it kind of stopped the story cold and completely put us inside of Catelyn's head, obviously, but like it really kind of related her in a way that some of these other characters had already been further along. Like I was on board with Catelyn in that chapter, because you're like, at the end of the day, this is her son. Like this is the most concerning thing to her, and that was very, it was driving her insane. It was a relatability factor that was missing in some of the interactions that we had with her before, and it really kind of hammered that home.
It's also the kind of thing the show never does. Like, there are plenty of shows that do dream sequences, delirium sequences.
Yeah.
Sort of like they play with the form. They give you, like, you're seeing it through their perspective now, and we're putting a filter on it, and it's hazy, and stuff like that. Game of Thrones never does that.
Nope.
But I feel like George R. R. Martin perhaps would have wanted them to, because he is pretty liberal with the kind of, let's take a break from reality for a minute.
Yeah.
And have this more just metaphorical, evocative style for a while.
I feel like that's kind of just a trope, though, that he's leaning on. And also, this was, what, mid-late 90s that he wrote this?
Yes,
so
96, 7.
Yeah, it's still very much, that's kind of a style that exists in these fantasy novels and exists in fantasy films and fantasy television shows at the time. So it fits in with the era, I think. I'm happy that the show didn't do it. Because we discussed... Because it's very corny. It can be done right.
It can.
More often than not, it's extremely corny. Which is why it's impressive. It comes off in the written word so well. It's
not like he does them all the time.
Yeah.
But he definitely does them more than the show, which is never. Which I do like. I like that they kept it nice and grounded. It makes it just, it distinguishes it. I think that they can kind of be a crutch, dream sequence and stuff like that, so I'm glad they didn't go for that. But I thought some of the hallucinogenic stuff was the best writing in the book.
Yeah.
Just very, very visceral and had a direct line to my reader brain. Were you surprised at all if I told you that Ned had 15 chapters, Catelyn 11, and Sansa and Arya 6 and 5 apiece? Does that surprise you? Like how little some characters featured?
Yeah. I mean, specifically Sansa, because she sticks out so much when we go to King's Landing with her. It feels like, I mean, she is present because it's from the point of view. So some of these characters are present in other characters' chapters.
Yeah.
So that also lends to, somebody like Sansa being more present than 6 chapters would indicate. But yeah, it's a little surprising when you add it up and tally it. Because Ned is very present throughout the book.
Very much so. Like, again, like I always said this book is a magic trick. He's the main character, and the whole book is kind of geared toward getting you to accept that and to know it, so you will be shocked in the final, eighth.
Yeah, and it worked.
It totally. Well, I mean, okay, so I mean, you're coming at this from someone who's already read the show and already familiar with the story. And the way we read it is so segmented.
Yeah.
Like, did it work for you?
It did. It was a different perspective.
If you use your imagination?
Because I'm comparing it to what I saw on the show to what we're reading here. And the flow, getting inside the characters' heads, having it be a slower burn than just the whole hour episode that we're dealing with. And you're bouncing back and forth. So we're dealing with the Ned drama, and then we bounce out for a whole different chapter. We go north to the wall with Jon, and then we're dealing with Daenerys, and then we come back to Ned, and we have 15 chapters worth of this. And it seems like so much more than 15 chapters.
Yeah.
So it's this slow burn that you didn't really get on the show, and I felt like that was very effective because more often than not, we'd be sitting here on the show talking about, Ned is he's doing it by the book. We have all of this Ned commentary.
We did, yeah.
And there's a ton else going on. And I didn't feel that way when I was watching the show, where I was reading so into every single one of his moves. Whereas in the book, you're literally reading into every single one of his moves. So it was effective in a different way than it was on the show to me.
Yeah, cool. I could take that. I mean, back to the magic trick bit, it seems like Sansa and Arya in this book, they're like supporting characters for Ned's story, right? Like he's the one who's making the plans, and they're like kind of perspective just a little bit. And just, again, the great thing about the story is that it takes those supporting characters and just lets them run with the rest of the whole story throughout the next 4 books.
Yeah.
In a very interesting way. I also want to mention what we talked about before, the clever way the book is a fantasy book that has magic stuff at the very beginning and the very end, and in between is kind of all grounded
Yeah.
reality medieval drama, which is very nice and a twist on the fantasy genre.
It is. It's like the film 28 Days Later. It's a human story that happens to have zombies in it. It's a zombie film. I mean, that's the backbone of it. That's the world that they're in. But it's about the characters. It's a human story that just so happens to have a zombie apocalypse. And this is kind of the same way. It's this.
Okay.
It's this political novel. It's this. You know, everybody's going back and forth about the throne, and we got these characters doing these different things, Ned, and you tend to forget the fantastical nature of everything, unless it's, you know, John getting his, you know, fingers down the throat of a white.
With a little spike here and there.
Because right off the bat, we get established that this is kind of a fantastical thing. And then throughout, George R. R. Martin sprinkles things in his world building, which is effective because it makes it feel like a lived-in world. These magical things aren't magical and fantastical. They just exist in this world, which makes them... Because they're mentioned very often. Like, we've talked about that more than a few times with these chapters. The fact that they just fit so neatly into the story, you're not like, wow, White Walkers. Like, even though that's like the exaggeration of it, like that's clearly the most fantastical part about this. Even things like the witch with Daenerys, or the priestess, things like that, the black magic, like it just works. It fits because it's been established. So to me, it's more of a political novel that happens to be set in a fantastical world, more so than a fantasy novel that leans on all of these fantasy tropes.
I like too. I like that. Because he gets so deep into things like, you know, Rob's identity crisis and Tyrion learning to love himself and learning to see that he has some worth and talking
Run
himself.
into battle with a huge speared helmet.
You know what? Cheers. You're not drinking.
That was
Cheers
fantastic.
to that because that was fun. I'm not going to forget that. I mean, the whole conceit of the whole series is that the White Walkers are coming and people should be banding together, not fighting amongst themselves. But because he gets so deep into why these people are concerned with what they're concerned about, like the battle for the throne, Joffrey is trying to rise up, the crisis that Ned's execution makes. I mean, Arya wants to get revenge. I can sympathize with why they wouldn't see something as obvious as a White Walker Holocaust coming. Yeah, because they're dug into these. They dug into these other stories. Like, and I think life's like that. Life's like that. Josh.
It is like that.
Like,
it's a wonderful metaphor.
It's one thing to say we should all care about this and band together, but when you have like your individual life, it's not that easy. It's not that easy to get yourself out of your routine. And I think this book captures that by going into different perspectives. But before I ask my final question, I'm a little tipsy and I just want to ask you this. You're a Star Wars guy.
I am a Star Wars guy.
You're a film guy. You know who Werner Herzog is.
Yes.
Werner Herzog is in the Star Wars show. Does that make any
strange.
sense to you?
I can't remember the last time. I read that news too, and I was interested by it because I can't remember the last time he's acted in something. There is a very famous video of him online.
Wasn't he in John Wick or something?
He might have been, but there's a famous video online. And first of all, I never said hi to everybody, so hi.
Yes.
So here's my hello, and also go Google Werner Herzog getting shot. Like, it's great. He's getting interviewed. I forget where. And he gets shot while he's being interviewed.
Who?
And he doesn't even flinch. He's just like, it's like he got bit by a bug. He's like, ugh, and then he just keeps going with his Werner Herzog thing.
Who shot him?
I don't remember the exact context of it. I think they're in like Bosnia or something like that, or they're in a war zone, and it's like a stray bullet.
Werner Herzog?
Well, it's a stray bullet that gets him, but it's just the fact that it's like he feels like it's a mosquito bite, and he's like, oh, and then he just keeps going. It's like, no, actually, he got
trying
shot.
to capture the existentialism of
So that's what we're welcoming into the Star Wars world. That's the realism. That's the kind of actor that you're going to get. Somebody so dedicated to the role, even if it's just an interview, he can get shot and continue doing what he's doing. So.
I'm into it. I'm all for that. And finally, my actual last question, I just want to get your opinion on that, is now that you've read this, what are you looking forward to or just have questions about for our journey into A Clash of Kings, the second book in the series?
I mean,
thoughts?
The obvious answer is I like comparing it to the show and seeing where it's going, because the first book lined up, and I kind of knew that coming, and lined up very well with where the first season went. And now, famously, the show is branched off.
I mean, it's just... It's less like it. We're still pretty much on track, but you're going to see more and more fishes as we go on.
Yeah, and I'm always interested in the follow-ups to something that's great. Because like True Detective Season 2 is terrible. Because...
Still haven't watched it.
True Detective Season 1, he had his entire life to write it. So obviously it's going to be as near perfect as possible.
And HBO's like, we have a hit, write this in a month.
Right? Follow-up albums. You have a great album that comes out and you have to capitalize on it, and you put out a piece of crap, but because that's been rushed out. So I want to see how this compares to the first book. Because George R. R. Martin has established this world, but also people have expectations. There's no expectation coming into this book. It's a fantasy novel.
Right.
But then it becomes all of these other things. What is that moving forward with these books now that he has an established brand? And to this point now, he is the most established brand of fantasy.
And it's kind of a problem for him at this point.
It is.
With the weight of expectations is almost too much. Just part of the issue.
What are the chances that Winds of Winter is like the Phantom Menace of Game of Thrones? Because the Phantom Menace had the high bar, like it's 30 whatever years you're waiting for a new Star Wars movie, and the expectations are so incredibly high because you've waited so long and you're so invested in this world that the movie's not terrible, it's not good, but it's remembered for being not as good as people wanted it to be.
Yes.
So I'm wondering as we get deeper into these books and my expectations rise, everybody who's out there who's waiting for Winds of Winter, is this like going to be a Phantom Menace situation where the expectations and the wait has been so long that nothing could possibly live up to this? Or is it going to be like a Force Awakens situation?
I mean, it depends on what you think.
Because the Force Awakens was very well received by everybody, whereas the Phantom Menace everybody hated it. And you had almost an equal amount of weight between the two.
I mean, insofar as people, it won't be able to meet expectations, almost certainly. Because there's just no way. Not now. Not after everything. Not after all this time and all this. And the gap between books couldn't have come at a kind of a worse time for the knowledge of the series. It went up so much in the intervening time. Mm-hmm. Like, if it had just been when there was no multi-million-dollar award-winning beloved show around the world, maybe you could have gotten away with it. Now there's no way. I think it'll be better than The Phantom Menace in terms of quality. I think it'll be a good book.
No, it'll be better in quality. It'll be the Phantom Menace moment for Game of Thrones, I think. However, I do have this. I'll end on this. I have this theory that George R.R. Martin has been purposely waiting to publish Winds of Winter until after the last season of Game of Thrones, because guess what everybody's going to be wanting after the series finale of Game of Thrones? More Game of Thrones. So now you can be like, here's my alternate history of my own story.
Well, Josh, guess what? You're not the 500th person to think of that.
I'm telling you, I'm part of the revolution. Let's do this. Let's go.
Well, thank you all for joining us for Protect the Black Live. Thank you for joining us for 2018. It's been a fun year. Interesting. We started this. Not we started this, but I had a good time with you, Josh, going through the books. I like drinking. Thanks for Cheryl for coming on the show and being my co-host. We've had giveaways. We've had trailers. We're going to be coming back with more in 2019. It could be a very big year for us with Game of Thrones. Maybe the Winds of Winter coming out. We hope you're there. We'll be back the first Wednesday in January. We're going to skip next Wednesday because it's Christmas. We're going to be gone. And read the first chapter of Clash of Kings by then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Let's read the prologue.
Straight away. Right
into the new year. And we will see you next Wednesday, January... at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time here on the Winter's Domain Facebook page. Check out Wit Club if you have a mind to, and have a happy holiday. Bye-bye, people.